Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Alternative Exit, live from the Employee Ownership Conference in Telford in the UK. And this has been brought to you by EOT Expert by Christian Wilson. So just imagine you've sold your business to an EOT and are now happily retired, spending your tax incentivised money when HMRC or the taxman knocks on your door to ask for the full repayment of your capital gains tax due on the sale. A trust, which is a huge pain. I mean, a trustee at your old company has just resigned and the team innocently but improperly accepted the resignation, inadvertently triggered a disqualifying event. This is a nightmare scenario. The truth is, running an EOT is not simple. From appointing trustees to managing the trust registers to keeping on top of all the annual one-off filings. One small mistake can be painfully expensive. This is where EOT Expert by Christian Wilson step in. His EOT Assured service keeps you compliant and confident with clear guidelines, templates and tailored support, whether you need a one-off transaction, support or ongoing retainer. Christian can even help you set up compliant bonus structures to ensure that your staff are getting the rewards that they deserve. So if you're looking to make a transition to an EOT or already established an employee ownership trust that wants peace of mind and proper governance, reach out to Christian at eotexpert.co.uk for technical expertise that's reassuringly human. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Alternative Exit, live from the Employee Ownership Association event here in Telford. We're really excited to have Shelley Poole joining us. Shelley, thanks for joining us.
You're right.
That's good. So Shelley, you are the founder of Wellington HR.
That's correct.
Yeah, can you tell us, and you guys started as an employee-owned business, is that right?
Well, nearly.
Okay.
So I started the business in 2019, and it was just me then. 2019, great year to be starting a business, just as we go into a pandemic.
Exactly,
know,
good timing.
Ideal. And my intention from day one was to grow an employee-owned business.
Yep.
And so whilst we didn't start as an EO business, we started as a standard limited company. Over the years, I knew that that's what I was working towards. And it was a question of getting the organisation to the right size and the right state to then have employees to then gift the business to.
Okay. You talked about the right size.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's, do you have a belief that you need a sort of critical mass of employees to be able to make employee ownership work effectively?
I think one of the things that we have shown at Wellington HR is that you can be a micro business to make employee ownership work. So we're a team of 6 currently. Okay. We're about to be 7, which we're very excited about. Right. And that is an absolutely teeny tiny employee-owned business. And so I don't think I would say, look, there's a minimum number and you have to have that minimum number. But I did feel, I think a priority for me, first of all, I mean, in 2019, there were no other employees. So you kind of need at least some to be employee-owned. Yeah. But second, it was also about making sure that the business was in a good financial state in order to be able to hand the business across. As an entrepreneur, me, myself, I am fairly used to taking risks. You know, I'm not someone you would describe as risk averse, but things that I would see as sort of just normal business risks in the very early stages of growing a business, I'm not sure that everybody else would see. So for me, actually, it was important to get to a stage where we had some money in the bank. We were in a good financially sound position for me to then be saying to people, yeah, employee ownership isn't all scary. It's actually a good thing for us.
Okay. And so even with that small team, I mean, what were some of the fears that the employees had when you told them that, hey, look, we're going to turn this into an employee-owned business?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Now, I'd like to think that we minimize the fears as much as possible because even well before we were employee-owned, I've always communicated through our recruitment and selection processes and our induction and so on what employee ownership is about. And we've conducted, internal training sessions and all the rest of it about how an EOT works and how that's different to direct ownership and so on. And so I don't think anyone was coming in with the misguided fear that they were going to lose their house if it all went wrong or anything like that. So we've really helped to kind of get our heads around that. I think, though, some of the fears that people might have is what impact is that going to have, on my work and the expectations that people have of me. But overall, the team have said that since we've become employee owned, because we were so pro EO and so open about what EO meant before we became EO, that actually a lot of them haven't noticed a huge difference in terms of anything scary.
Look, I think, well, a lot of the benefits that I hear people talking about with EO is obviously creates a more open lines of communication and people can contribute more to the business. A small team probably has that anyway.
I mean, I've always shared the financials.
Okay.
There's no surprises there. We're completely transparent with their salaries.
So totally, like you say, transparent with salaries. Everyone knows what everyone's earning?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
we got transparency around that. Literally, people in the team are looking at the profit and loss.
Yeah. Did you have to do any education? I mean, you guys are in HR. I mean, you're a HR consultant. So did you have to teach people about how to read the financials?
Yeah, and I think that's important because one of the things alongside building Wellington HR, I also undertook a doctorate looking at employee voice and employee-owned organizations. And as part of that, I kind of looked at the barriers to voice and the things that people need. And one of the things that I did really identify from that research was how much people need information, but they also need to be able to understand the information if they're then going to have intelligent comments to make, and share their voice rather than it just being like, oh, where should we go for the Christmas party? Actually, let's make it meaningful. And so I've sort of learned that from my own research and then been able to implement that within Wellington HR. So we did spend quite a bit of time as a team really looking at what does this mean and breaking down the financials and being able to go, okay, if we're going to scrutinize these, do we understand how this document works for us?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd love to dive into that shortly, a little bit more about sort of what changes you actually had to make to make that realistic. But what other pieces that came out of your research, what other elements have you gone and implemented into Wellington HR?
So a lot, as you can probably imagine. I mean, it's great. It's not a small undertaking, but it's not a small undertaking, but it is great homework for the journey to become employee owned. And going back to your original question about, were we EO from the go? A big part of that was linked to that study and me going, I can see what I can build and I can see how I can build a different business, as a result of that. So that transparency has been absolutely key. It's also looking at potential barriers to voice that can exist, different things that can cause people to engage differently with not just the information that you're sharing, but the way in which you're sharing that information and how available that's being made to people, taking their needs into account. And I have produced a short summary of my thesis because I felt like nobody really wanted to read that unless they have a problem with sleeping. That is available from Wellington HR. So I'm happy to share that with anybody who would like to find out more about how to really effectively share voice in EO businesses.
If it's on is it on your website?
It's one of those things that we send to people, but it's on the EO Hub library, so it's available there. So I can share links with you.
Well, fantastic.
Like.
We'll put some links in the show notes here so people can get that. So a really important part of employee voice is not just enabling them to speak, but also making sure that they're heard and it's actioned upon. I mean, how important was that, like in the research, and how have you, enacted that both for yourself and for your clients?
Yeah. So I think it's really worth bearing in mind that you can't please all of the people all of the time. And sometimes employee voice, it can almost be misinterpreted as this kind of fluffy thing of, if we talk to everybody, everyone will agree and then we'll do it and business will be great. And that's fantastic. But sometimes people say things, that for whatever reason aren't workable, or maybe they're coming from a self-interested place rather than a business-focused place. And even in a wonderful EO with a great voice-focused culture, that is still going to happen. So we need to be realistic about that. And I would say it's important to demonstrate that if someone has suggested something and it's a great idea, that we've implemented that in a kind of you said we did way. But I would also say that it's really important to feed back on why you haven't taken things forward. So if employees are saying we this or we like this idea or whatever it might be, I think it's really important to be able to say, we listened to this, we considered this is the factors that we considered, and we haven't taken it forward. for these reasons.
Yeah.
And that then means that people can still remain engaged in the voice processes. Whereas if you don't do that final step of giving the feedback about how people's voice was used, then next time they're not going to bother. What's the point? Nobody listens to me. So I'd say feeding back on the things you take forward is important, but I would also say feeding back on the stuff you don't take forward and the reasons why is super important as well.
I mean, that could be a long list.
Yeah.
I mean, how is it, I mean, what are some of the sort of best practices that you see for people once they've sort of captured the voice to obviously assess the validity for those suggestions for the business, and then also providing that feedback when there's a large set of suggestions?
Absolutely. So there's a few different things I would recommend. I won't go through them all, don't worry. But first of all, I would say it's important to make sure that if you're working with representatives, employee council members, somebody like that, that those individuals are trained on how they manage voice and manage people's expectations, and that there are proper processes. So it isn't just you then go to your forum or your council or whatever it might be, and it's like a shouting out of, can we have a pay rise? And, stuff like that. It's always, can we have a pay raise? So, it's not just that actually it's presented in a structured way. So there's proper agenda setting and things of that nature. The second thing, and Deb Oxley was talking about this in the session that we just had, which I think is really important, is that employee ownership is not just about the rights of ownership. It's also about the responsibilities of ownership. So it's not just about saying, here is the thing that I would like to see. It's also about thinking, what are the implications for the business about that?
Exactly.
And one of the things that I've seen as good practice that some of our clients do, and we have frankly plagiarized from them, is actually asking people putting forward suggestions to prepare a mini business case. So for example, if your suggestion is, we'd all love more holiday, perfectly valid suggestion, but let's get it in a business case so we can say, what are the potential benefits of this? What are the potential negatives in terms of business impacts of this? What would that look like? So those arguments are being weighed up and it's being presented to your forum, your council, whatever your voice mechanism might be. Less as here's a suggestion that I've thought about for 2 seconds that might be nice, and more as a carefully thought through proposal. And from that, we have actually seen that sometimes people will edit their own suggestions because they'll start by saying, this is a good idea, and then they'll weigh up those pros and cons, and they'll come to a place where they'll say, this is actually my alternative idea because I've thought about what it means.
Well, that's an awesome result. I mean, it sounds like that. I mean, I love that because it takes... Well, he treats people like actual owners.
Yeah.
Right? Like, puts them in the shoes of a capital allocator and goes like, is this a viable decision for the business? But
exactly,
that's got to be difficult for a lot of people who aren't used to that. I mean, how do you get people to that level?
I think one of the things that's really important to bear in mind, a mistake that I have seen in lots of organizations that can create a real division, is in certain sectors, there are people who are not working with computers all day, which I know when you work with computers all day sounds like quite a shocking thing, but people still have to manufacture things and so on for our economy to work. And sometimes we can fall into the trap of putting all of our voice stuff online. The forms on the intranet, great. You can watch your video here. And all of this is lovely for people who do use computers all the time. But what are we doing to make sure that that is accessible to people who are not sat in front of a computer all of the time? And that comes down to looking at the different mediums that we're using for things, making sure that things, are accessible to people who might not even own a computer of some sort. They're just going to be doing things on their phone, and making sure that those reps have the training that I've already talked about, but also the resources to be able to spend time with people to kind of work through those processes that I've just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, because that's a big thing. I mean, people, it's very, very tough. If you're sort of wanting to make a suggestion for a business to do it in isolation, you need to collaborate with different people, different parts of the business. So, I mean, how do you advise clients to create the space and for people to clock off on the machine that they're working to then go and have those conversations?
So I think there's a few elements to that. So first of all, any other HR people who are watching this podcast will be well aware that there is a tradition in trade unionized environment that trade union representatives are legally entitled to time away from their usual duties in order to undertake their job as a representative.
Yeah.
Now, does agreeing something like that have a potential bottom line impact? Of course it does. You know, I'm not naive to these things. But on the flip side, if we're saying that employee voice is important and it's a mechanism that can grow our business, help motivation and employee retention and all of that, then actually thinking about what time and other resource we're giving our employee representatives, I think is a really important thing that businesses should be giving consideration to. And of course, I mentioned earlier the training side of things, because being a representative actually has quite a bit of responsibility associated with it. And sometimes, if you're a representative, sometimes people can seek to take advantage of your position by trying to push you into driving their agenda above that of other people. Because everyone's entitled to an agenda. You know, every single one of us who's an employee owner is entitled to have this is our thing, but decisions shouldn't be made based on who shouts the loudest. And so making sure that representatives are given the tools and the techniques to be able to capture everybody's voice rather than the one vocal person who really likes to hammer a point home, I think is key.
Well, that's why I love that. I love that suggestion you had of actually writing that business plan. Like, makes a little bit more of a meritocracy, like, and for each decision. So it takes that bias out, which is awesome. You did bring up something that just to press on a little bit further. Talk about the investment in training in the employee ownership transition. I mean, I see a lot of owners very happy to get support from their lawyers and accountants to make the technical aspects of the transition really work. But how they sort of think about the investment into the actual employee ownership perspective, like the cultural and HR changes, is something that's not as well talked about and is often underinvested. How do you help people to validate the investment into that side, like that ongoing training and enablement of the employee owners?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question. And of course, I think it's important because I'm clearly biased. I'm a people person. I'm not going to pretend I'm not biased.
Exactly.
But one of the things I think sometimes that can happen is that the transition is often driven by a founder. And, you know, they may have a financial interest in that. And then it can be, we've done the finances, we've done the legals, done, thank you very much. And I think it's really important that succession planning and looking beyond that is included. Now, at Wellington HR, I of course think we're a little bit different. Again, biased. But unlike most employee-owned businesses, I actually took the decision that I wanted to gift the business rather than selling the business for the full market value. Because I really believe in employee ownership as a tool for kind of social equality.
So very quickly, so what does that like? Because most people like get a market-based valuation and then they put that on deferred consideration to pay back over time. So you just put like a nominal figure on that?
Yeah, it was £5 actually. So I say gifted.
Genuinely
nominal. A whole £5. You know, spending spree. But and the reason for that is I didn't want Wellington HR to be going forward with that deferred consideration. I wanted financial freedom from day one. So when I say I believe in this stuff, I really do.
You really do.
My money where my mouth is.
It sends a huge signal to your employees, your fellow owners.
But the sort of the flip side of that is that I'm now continuing as managing director for a few years, whereas in a lot of more traditionally created employee-owned organisations where there is that deferred consideration, often the founder, not always, but often the founder is at that point where they're wanting to exit there and then. And so that succession piece of who's going to be leading the organization and do they have the tools to be able to do that, I think is really important. And what we often see at Wellington HR is people coming to us who almost feel like they're in at the deep end because they're now leading an organization that maybe even 3 months ago they didn't know that they were going to be leading, but the founder's gone, I'm ready to retire. Thank you very much. Bye. Good luck. Best wishes. And so we're then supporting those people because they're like, we don't really know how to do
wow.
HR in an EO environment. Maybe even the previous founder has dealt with the HR stuff, often in a legally compliant way, but not always.
Not always, yeah.
Mentioning
Small
no names, of
businesses
course.
are like that,
It can definitely be the case. And then they're like, actually, we want to be legally compliant because we want to, protect the organization from a risk perspective, but also we want to drive an EO culture.
Yeah.
And how do we bring all of that together? And so I would say that's a group we often find ourselves working with, but I don't want to sound like I'm casting shade on founders, because there are plenty out there who will also come and talk to us and say, we're moving towards EO.
Okay.
And I do want the future leaders of the business to be well prepared. So, let's have a bit of a HR audit now, ready for transition.
Okay. Yeah, look, as I said, it seems like it's very, very easy for people to be able to invest in the events, like rather than sort of that ongoing like compliance readiness, I think, which has got to be a huge challenge for you.
Yeah, I think the voice and the education as well, because, something I touched on earlier when I was talking about business proposals is that it's brilliant that employee ownership is sold as a benefit. That's a really important part of an employer's employer branding and can really help, give them a USP in terms of a, competitive employment market, recruitment market, I should say. So I think it's great that employee ownership is sold as a benefit, but I also think it's really important that education piece of it does come with responsibility.
Yeah.
I really think if you're going to create a healthy culture of ownership, that needs to happen. And people need information about the things they can share their employee voice on and so on. I just think all of that is so important if you're really going to create, as I've said, a culture of ownership and a culture where people really see what EO means on a day-to-day basis, rather than that's nice, maybe annually we'll get a bonus, but that's it.
Yeah. I love it bringing into the day-to-day through all those elements. I mean, with your HR leader and professional hat on, what do you think is the difference, like the biggest differences between managing HR in an EO business versus a non-EO business?
I think employee voice is the biggie for me.
Yeah.
And of course it is. But
I can't believe it. It's like you've done a doctorate on it or something.
I think employee voice is the biggie for me. And one of the things I talked about in my huddle session yesterday is that HR people have an opportunity to really lead by example in implementing employee voice. It is quite common, particularly in smaller organizations or in non-unionized organizations, that let's say you want to introduce a new HR policy. Maybe you want to review and increase your benefits in relation to something like maternity leave, just as an example. It is quite common in a non-EO organization that is just decided upon by a combination of HR and the organization's leadership, and then everyone gets an email saying a new maternity policy is on the intranet. Great.
What do I do with that?
Yeah. Not pregnant at the moment. Thank you very much. Delete email. But in an EO organization, to be able to actually go to employees and say, these are some of the things that we're weighing up. These are some of the potential costs to the business, but these are some of the potential benefits and why we want to do this for the business. And gathering employee voice on that topic can be so powerful, and it can increase that sense of ownership for people. And it moves employee voice away from the superficial, what brand of coffee shall we have type conversations, and actually helps people to think, what are the pros and cons of these different approaches? And that then means that when you finalize and launch your policy, it's less, why are we doing this? This isn't fair. Why are we potentially spending our bonuses on this thing? And it's more, we've devised this together as an organization.
You've done the change management up front.
Exactly. Yeah. And if other people, other leaders in the organization can see the buy-in that is achieved by HR people working in that way, then voice becomes less scary, because voice is scary to some people, because voice sometimes think, oh my God, I'm giving up control, and what if I listen to people and I don't agree with what they say? But if you manage it in that way that I talked about earlier, of communicating to people how and why decisions were made, then actually in that situation it doesn't need to be scary.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. Shelley, I like to ask people 3 questions at the end of each podcast. So just put you on the spot for a fast round with quick answers. Are you ready?
I'm slightly scared, but I'm ready.
Okay, so who is the person that you most admire in employee ownership?
Oh gosh, okay. That's a really difficult one to choose. But I am going to say Robert Oakeshott, of lectures fame,
Yes.
just for being such a pioneer in starting to think about how that kind of not just division of profit, but also that division of power and voice can be implemented. And the fact that his legacy still lives on through the lectures is just fantastic and inspiring.
Very good. What is your favorite resource on employee ownership?
Oh, that's an even harder question. There are many resources that I love, and don't worry, I'm not going to plug my own doctorate here. Instead,
Which you can find on the EO Hub.
No, I'm going to say the Nuttall Report. I still think there's so much that can be learned from that.
Okay, fantastic. And finally, what would you say to an owner who's sitting on the fence regarding a transition to an employee ownership model?
I'm going to say, think about your people and your comms, because I hear horror stories, and I describe them as horror stories, of people coming to us. They've just become an employee owner, and I'll say to them, oh, when did you find out that you were becoming employee owned? And they said, oh, on the day we transitioned. And that can be really frightening for people. And it can lead to cynicism in employee ownership, because people then think, oh, the founder's just done this for the tax. They don't care about us. They've just basically shafted us. It can really be perceived in that way. So think about your people and your communications before you do it. Don't just do the legals and the financials.
Okay, that's a great message. So, Shelley, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go if they'd like to learn more about you and Wellington HR?
Well, if you search for Wellington HR, you will find us. Yeah, you're very welcome to visit our website, find out more about how we specifically support employee-owned businesses in a way that matches EO culture.
Fantastic. Shelley, thanks for joining us on The Alternative Exit.
Thank you.
Cheers.